I'll give you the long story so that you have all of the context, Jessica. I've been in strength and conditioning for the better part of like 20 years now.
Okay.
I left to go and do my graduate degree around 23 and I turned 44 next month. So yes, 20 years. Um, uh, Proud of my career. Got to a point where I was burnt out and switched gears. And my wife and I opened our own business, which was sorely needed for me. And um, of course, after 20 years of being in the industry, it's never very far away. And it's still very much a part of who I am and what I do. And I love it. I felt like I just needed to get away from the rigmarole of of climbing the ladder and dealing. It was really like dealing with like professional team politics is really what burnt me out. I got into pro sports for the last 5 years of that part of it, and I just couldn't really deal with it. And so I got away from it and was like, man, I want to get back in the industry, but I do not want to do it by getting back on the floor, right? Like, it's not really what I want to do. I don't want to be on my feet coaching 10, 12 hours a day. I don't want to work for a professional team and like have my time taken away from me. We really don't get to decide birthdays, holidays, teams playing, you're gone.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to try and find a way to fit back in the industry. And one thing that I've always enjoyed or just feel is important is our industry serves the overserved. It doesn't serve the underserved, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody that is aspiring to progress in our industry does it by serving the overserved. Professional athletes, professional space. Not that they shouldn't be, but I wanted to, and I want to use my experience, for lack of a better word, whatever it is that I have to give back, to find ways to serve what I would consider to be the underserved in our industry. And I can't say for certain that I knew what it looked like, but I figured I'm going to start with online education and I'm going to let the response to whatever it is I put out, whatever the market response is, help guide me, right? Like I'm going to throw this out here and see, and like any and everything that you hear about marketing is you need to know who you're selling to and like who is your ideal customer. And while I have an idea of it, I figured I'm going to cast, my line and like see who bites. But with an intent of trying to craft something that I think was important to deliver to people that needed it, for lack of a better way to put it. Fully aware and this just having happened like literally this past weekend. My cousin's fiance just passed away from liver cancer this past weekend at 36 years old. And while we don't know all of the details, whether they've been shared with the family or whether they were known or not, the growing number of what I would call young women that are being diagnosed is not something that has been immediately on my radar, but like I've I've heard anecdotally and like cursory, right? But like have luckily not had it be, when I use the word luckily, I want to be careful, but like not have it be an issue for me.
Yeah.
One of my best friend's wives just passed away from breast cancer in August. So when I say like I'm starting to kind of hear and see and notice, and it seems to be entering the orbit with a bit more regularity than I was probably previously unaware of.
Mm-hmm.
And what that process is like and what people in that scenario go through, I don't have any intimate knowledge of. But instinctively, I feel like whatever it is we are experts in, Avedis and myself, has some utility, right? And like has some value. for the population. And to be frank with you, and when Avedis and I caught up, because he's one of the people that I definitely wanted to talk to about just in general, like I said, I'm doing general market research. I'm doing a program design course. Avedis, you know me, you know my teaching style, you know my coaching style. So you're someone that I think will be able to deliver like valuable guidance, not even feedback, but like guidance and insight on where you think that like I can create material that will be effective. It Our conversation, as all of my conversations with Avedis end up doing, and I mean like they go in really like fruitful areas, he started to speak about a gap in whether you want to call it service or information or the delivery of what we do for people in scenarios that I described. And without giving too much detail, Jessica, I don't know all the detail. I do know, or at least I believe I know that you've gone through it to some degree, right?
Yep.
And so, a lot of what Avedis was sharing was, when I was going through this, like, not luckily, like I am a professional, so I was able to like help guide, develop, and provide this for her, but also in my position, realizing like this is just not available to people, like programming, resources, information, whatever it is. And in the last month and a half, I've been talking to a lot of people and kind of revealing, like, I'm trying to put this thing together. And there's one person that I spoke to where she was like, what you're describing to me and what you want to do sounds like purpose. Sounds like you're trying to find your purpose in strength and conditioning. And when I spoke to Avedis and he was telling me, it immediately felt like that's where our time needs to be spent. Not like these other things as well, but like this is where I find like an immediate like utility and purpose for what it is that we do. However, I and all I wanted, what this is the infancy of, again, like now, like doing market research. Like, what, as someone that, as the two of you as a couple, and then you specifically, Jessica, like, what do you think is of value? What do you think would serve the population? Do you feel like there is value in it, in trying to put something together? I'm just trying to get a sense now from somebody that has gone through it, that has a partner that's a professional in the industry, that if you said, yeah, you know what, like the fact that, he was there not only as my partner, but as this professional, like helped me with this, or no, it didn't, or man, I don't know, it's still really delicate. Everybody's different, or, I'm just trying to get an idea of whether it is a valuable endeavor and what some of, not the pain points are, but what some of the delicacies around this subject might be, in order to like do it both like in a respectful, effective, and like useful way.
Yeah.
So that's the whole spiel. I don't expect, like, I know that's a lot, and like the other thing is I don't expect you to like give me answers. If it's something you want to think about, you know what I mean? Like if it's something
I mean I can give you like just initial thoughts. I think right. And I've even said, I think recently to Avedis, maybe it was when he brought up this call, that like I regret not documenting my journey more, just because I, with his help and the help of a couple others that he linked me up with, sort of cobbled it together so that I was at least keeping a routine, but it still felt very disjointed, not well planned out, not really sure if I was really making any progress, or if I was supposed to be making progress, if I was just supposed to be, keeping my head right and sort of keeping myself in the game. But I mean, I can tell you the two things you said are very true from my perspective. Number one, the cases of young people being diagnosed with cancer is definitely on the rise. I mean, I do a lot of reading about it, having been diagnosed last year. I myself I was 48 when I was diagnosed, so I wasn't as young as like the people that they're really talking about necessarily. For breast cancer, it used to be breast cancer diagnoses were more like 60 and up. So I was young-ish for that, but you mentioned liver cancer. I mean, other cancers are just on the rise among young people, and nobody can sort of figure out why.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. It's a huge population, and I think there's a large percentage of that population that, other than the cancer, are healthy people. I mean, they're getting enough sleep, they're eating relatively well, they're at least aware of their fitness and doing something. And the reason I think that is because there are so many people in, like, just my, for example, Peloton cancer support group, just breast cancer, that every day there's like new, just diagnosed, just diagnosed, just diagnosed. And these are people who, when you go and you look at their profiles, like, they're either doing strength training and or some sort of cardio. Might not be the best cardio. We talk about that a lot, but they're doing some activity at least 4, 5, 6 times a day. So these are otherwise healthy, healthy people. And that sounds silly, right? Because it's like, yeah, but you've got cancer. But otherwise, before that, they were perfectly fine with their health and wellness. And so I think there is and a lot of the questions in that support group are, what can I do? What am I allowed to do? What if I have this surgery? What if I have that surgery? What are my restrictions? And then what do I do when I'm going through chemotherapy? What do I do when I'm going through radiation? What do I do when I'm on the maintenance medication? And it's just the various responses that you see. You can just tell that, like, nobody's getting consistent good advice.
Right.
All the way to, my mom just had surgery because she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was told basically, 8 to 12 weeks, do nothing. Now, she's older. She's not fit. You wouldn't look at her and be like, oh, you're fit. Whereas when I would go to my oncology appointments, they would just look at me and be like, well, the general recommendation is X, but you're going to be just fine. Like, what does that mean? So I applaud you for recognizing that it's a need. I agree, it's a need. I'm happy to be an open book about my experiences. I just don't have much in terms of, oh, well, here's what worked, because I don't know if it worked for me.
Right. And I guess from my position, whether it is, here's what I'm curious about. And I know that everybody's probably going to be different, but you will know. I'm not looking at you for like the answers from like a X's and O's standpoint. Like, I think that's where we come in. What I am looking for is, like, one, like you said, receptivity to either the information at a particular time. Meaning, yeah, prior to going into a chemotherapy appointment or afterwards, how receptive to, all right, today you need to do X, Y, and Z, would you have been? So, you know what I mean? Like, I when I say, like, I don't know where you are in your journey, which I don't, I'm curious as to whether, like, in the thick of your journey, if this would have been something that you would have taken on. Yes. And is that, like, reflective of what you think is probably a general experience? So is it like at what stage would something like this be received by people, or don't even think about that because people don't know whether they'll receive it or not because it's not being offered? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, these are the answers I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I think you might get a different response regarding when it should be presented or received based on whether you're dealing with a population like, I was somebody, with the help of the Vedas, I was already in a routine of working out, taking care of myself. And I think for those people, for somebody like me, I would have loved to hear right after I was diagnosed, here's what's going to happen, and here are the things you should be doing to make sure you maintain your health and fitness. Like, literally, I would have liked it to be right then and there. All the way from, you're going to have this surgery, here's what you should be doing for the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, until you start your chemotherapy. Once you start your chemotherapy, here are the things you might need to adjust. Here's what we can help you, here's a routine you can follow. For me, it would have been so helpful to just have somebody say, here are all the things you should be doing, because it's hard to think of all that yourself as a patient when you're also working full time, going to multiple doctor's appointments a week, doing infusions, recovering from surgery, having another surgery, right? And again, every journey is different. and maybe I should give you some context just so that as we're talking, you do know what sort of I went through. If Vedas hasn't, and if I'm being repetitive, just tell me. I was diagnosed in mid-January of last year with breast cancer. I had a double mastectomy in early March. It's called a double mastectomy with expanders, which most young people end up doing because they still want to look feminine. So I had that in March. I started chemotherapy in mid-April. I did 20 rounds of chemotherapy, so that lasted until August 30th. I then had reconstructive surgery in September. And because of some other genetic markers, I then had a full hysterectomy in November. So with absolutely no guidance other than what we were able to cobble together from doctors, other than saying, eat healthy and keep exercising. Like, that's what I was told to do.
Yeah.
But peppered in with, don't lift anything more than 5 pounds for 8 weeks because you had this surgery. And then don't lift anything more than 5 pounds for 8 weeks because you had the second surgery. And don't lift anything for, like, how are you even supposed to go through life without lifting more than 5 pounds?
5
right?
pounds. Yeah.
So, it was frustrating. And Vedas can chime in. I would say during that journey, that entire journey that I just outlined, there weren't many days where I couldn't do something. Right? I mean, granted, like the couple of days post double mastectomy when he had to help me up off the couch, I couldn't do much. But with the right tools and having somebody like yourself saying, okay, you can't go and do 20 minutes of conditioning, or you can't go do back squats, but you could go and do this, that, or the other thing, if for no other reason to keep your mind in the routine of exercising, moving, etc. Right? There's no guidance for that whatsoever. And there's no guidance for then how to progress it, or how you might be different than the average patient that they're telling, don't lift your hands over your head for 4 weeks or what have you.
Now, and like, this is where I think for me, and like, perspective is really important, because, and I want to back to the comment that you just made. Call it ignorance, call it a lack of experience, exposure, whatever it is. I think in my head, and I think in I would imagine in most people's heads, when they hear that someone is diagnosed with cancer and they're starting whatever treatments they have to do, the belief is they're not going to have the ability to do this because what they're going to go through is so taxing. Whereas, while that's not untrue, what you just said, though, and I want to make sure, you essentially said that is untrue. Like, there were probably more days where I could do something than there were days where, like, I like really could not do anything. And so flipping, like, so there's a bit of a paradigm shift that then happens where it's like, well, if there are more days in a week, as an example, like if out of 7 days, 4 out of the 7 you felt like you could do something, and 3 you were down, like, that's still dramatically different than what might be the common misconception that if this is what is happening to you, like, you're unable to do anything. And it also seems like the doctors are kind of echoing that as well. We're like, you can't do anything for 8 to 12 weeks. Where it's like, is that right for me to say that that's?
Yeah. And I, yes, it is. And I think, from the doctor's perspective, right, they're just, in a lot of cases, just being cautious, I guess.
Sure.
But it's like this contradiction, because on one hand, they're saying it's important for you to keep moving. The research shows that you should do at least 150 minutes of exercise a week, even during treatment, right? Like, that's the big number, 150. And there's a couple, I can send you some people that I did start following that, at least gave some guidance in terms of like, oh yeah, that person went through exactly what I'm going through, and yet they're doing these things, so I should be able to do them too, right? They weren't programs, but they were just posting things that they were doing. And during chemotherapy, I mean, I think depending on how this all ends up looking for you, a lot of the chemotherapies are the same, even across cancers. So with breast cancer, for example, there's lots of different types of breast cancer, but for the most part, patients are going to have the same 3 types of chemotherapy, and patients feel differently on those types. But when I was going through my chemotherapy, it was, you can plan it, to your point. Like if there's 7 days in a week and you're getting your infusion, Avedis would say this to me all the time. If you're getting your infusion on Wednesday and they're also going to pump you up with steroids, you're going to feel pretty good Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then you learn real quickly that Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, you don't feel so hot. So if you're programming, those would just be your recovery days or something low impact, and it's cumulative. So maybe it becomes an adjustment of, okay, if you're on infusion number 1, that's going to feel differently than infusion number 20.
Right.
I can tell you, I definitely didn't feel as energetic after number 20 as I did after number 1. But I was still, I think it's all a matter of perspective. I would come home frustrated some days and be like, he'd be like, how's your workout? And I'd be like, oh, everything's so hard. Everything's so heavy. And he was like, yeah, but really in reality, you're only lifting 30%, 25% less than you were before. Right. So now tell me again, was it really that bad? Just like, thanks. But yeah, that's Avedis support. But he's right.
He's pretty good at what he.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. So, yeah, I can't even imagine if somebody had handed me, instead of a packet telling me how terrible I was going to feel for a year, if they had handed me a packet that said, hey, here's some resources. If you want to continue your exercise program, here's somebody that you can work with. They can help you customize a program, do check-ins, adjust it as needed based on if you're going through another surgery or a different procedure. I mean, one of the procedures I had to do was getting a port placed, and I didn't think it was going to do anything. Like, I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. It's just they're sticking a thing in that they then use for the chemo. But I went to PT 2 days later and with Alyssa, a friend of Avedis's, and I couldn't do anything. Nobody warned me about that, right? So it's just poor information. And why are we making it harder for people who are already going through a difficult time?
Well,
Avedis, I see you took mute off, so yeah.
I think one of the best things that we did was we oversimplified it, and I don't know if, I mean, as a coach, it definitely wouldn't be for all coaches to maybe have the perspective, and for the patient, it's population based. Like, there's no way that she's trained. So, and she lives a healthy lifestyle. So trying to get her to keep doing those things is easier than someone who's untrained, doesn't maintain a healthy lifestyle. And now they're being faced with a grueling, taxing, depressing, emotional treatment. So I think that to develop something like this, you have to give them like psychological support with coach that understands the psychology and understands like how to manipulate like a microcycle of how you feel on a daily basis without getting like you normally get with a huge amount of PTs and doctors, where it's like, I'm 70, so you already are stereotyping me. You're doing a Q&A with me, and I'm telling you, I have a couple of drinks every week. I don't work out. I'm saying what everybody else says.
Yeah.
I don't go to the gym. Probably told you that too. So now when I'm being zapped with the chemo meds, why would you now encourage me to do all these things that I should be doing when you know I either detest them, I'm not going to do them. It's going to make me feel worse without also having the person that's psychologically cultivating like my mind, teaching me new like it. For a lot of people, it'd be like this. It'd be such an undertaking, but you just have to have the right system for people to opt into for it to work. Because all I ended up doing with her, because she at least was trained, was I was like, all right, chemo is going to be a football season. Mm-hmm. And this is what your game chemo is game day. But game day for like a football player, they feel that night and the next morning. Where like you're not going to actually feel it for like 48 to 72 hours. So like we're going to use it to. So then all it was like, all right, well, we're just going to look at this in the context of depletion and sport, but like the activity is different. And even now, like when she complains about like some of the residual effects, it's like this. Well, did you feel like that when you were lying down? Yes. And you felt the same way when you were doing lunges? Yes. Okay, it's probably not the lunges. It's just the chemo. So right. You're not going to hurt yourself. Continue. But like those kind of coaching things for like the average person, it's the coach that knows those types of things to like do and say while prescribing, and then like how to modify. But it's more so you're the vast majority of the population isn't her either. Like they're her in terms of age, like young, they're young. Or like they're becoming more young, I guess is a better way. But still, like the youth of our, like I guess Gen Z is getting better at working out at frequency for their own personal vanity reasons for the most part. But that isn't giving them necessarily the knowledge then to like combat something like this when they're faced with it. So like it's a double-edged sword. Like you gotta have both in tandem, because she could probably speak to it more. Like how many people that are in these predicaments that like can't believe what she's doing.
Yeah.
They can't fathom doing it. So the perspective is already jaded, and her ability to strain is higher because she understands like what that actually felt like healthy. Where like people trying to strain when they already feel like crap, to then get them to buy into, oh no, you're not going to hurt yourself. It's actually just the chemo. Or like, you feel like this because of something that is beyond your control. It has nothing to do with the body weight activity you're currently doing. I think there's that part.
So let me ask you this. This is kind of the crux of the conversation for me. It is not Vedas. I agree 110% with one of the key points here, which I don't think is even like in the sphere of being able to do, which is she had you, and you are a coach that clearly is more than a coach with your relationship, but having the person there to be like, and to be able to distill, this is how you feel, or is huge. And that's not something that I can either replicate in terms of being there. However, my question, and this is the question for Jessica, is like, you heard that from Vedas, and chances are you didn't hear that anywhere else, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, the feeling is going to be from X, so don't let X interfere with the sense of value in doing this movement. It's valuable. Mm-hmm. The reason why you feel this way comes from here. Vedas is brilliant to be able to have done that, and you haven't heard that anywhere else. But if you did hear that somewhere else, in your Peloton chat room, if somebody was like, hey, if you feel like this today, it is because of this. So keep going. And maybe you don't have the person to do it, but at least you kind of go, oh, all right, I was wondering. But now that I've gotten that confirmation, which is kind of what education is, would that have been valuable? So Vedas, I almost feel like, does this conversation where you don't have a coach, but what we're distilling that people may be wrestling with, and now we're saying this to them, might be empowering enough. Is there value in that? Or is it really like, no, you need that person to be there to do it for it to have value? That's kind of my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's value either way. And I think for some people, they would even say they would get more value, or at least ask more questions of somebody who's not intimately associated with them.
Right.
Only because it's a very vulnerable time. Obviously, I'm getting emotional, so I'll skip that. We can talk about that offline. But I think, yes, I think that for some people, they would be able to be much more open and asking questions and expressing concerns and opening up that like true vulnerability with somebody who is not just with them day to day. Because especially for people who are going into this healthy, there is like this underlying psychology that like, I just overnight became weak. And now like I need help with that. But part of who I was not that. Am I making sense? So So I think there could be great value in having that support, whether it's in person or virtual or in a support group. And I'll tell you, there are people doing some things. I mean, there are, like, I looked into a nutrition recovery program. There are people doing things, and they're charging a lot of money for it, and people are paying for it. But I think it's only available to a certain hierarchy of people because of the cost. So I think that's
which I hate, by the way.
Yeah.
Sorry, but go ahead.
And the other thing I would say is, if we're focusing a little bit on the chemotherapy, like how do we use that as an example, like the game day example. But I think even Avedis would tell you, from the time of my diagnosis to the time that things actually started happening was a long time. So even if you had, like, I was diagnosed January 13th, my first surgery was March 6th. So even if you have a human who is not, and that's pretty typical, who is not already in the routine of doing something, again, if at that first, like, hey, sorry to tell you have cancer, we need to schedule a time to get together so I can give you some information, because it's going to be really important for you to develop some routines going into this treatment that are going to help carry you through. I mean, 8 weeks is a long time for somebody to at least get started on a routine. So I think the sooner the information gets to the patient, the better, as opposed to like what Aveda said, which is, oh, you have your first infusion, like, let's get you started on an exercise program. Like, that just seems daunting.
Yeah. And I'm not laughing at that.
No, it's no. I mean, you gotta find humor in this, because otherwise it's just really shitty.
So, and to piggyback on another point, like, and again, to give where like my head is in real thought around this, trying to get someone that is already sedentary and has now been diagnosed with cancer to be like, all right, now add a fitness program to what you do. Like, I feel like that is like the far end of the spectrum / person to attack.
Yeah.
You, I think, are a reflection, and Vase, even though you're like, man, and I agree, you're probably a smaller percentage of the population. It's still a huge population, though, right? Like, you still represent, like, in like objective number, people that, like you just said, man, I wish I got this, or I wish this was said, or I wish this was part of the plan. And what you also just said, Jessica, which to me, I would agree, as someone, and I think if I heard this correctly, that sees themselves as fit, healthy, active, should not be in the category, that is now suddenly thrust into the category psychologically and mentally, what that does for that person who has probably always identified as strong, that is now like has this thing. They probably need more legit like support, guidance, or whatever it is, because they're already of that kind of mindset where they want guidance, they want coaching, they want the information to be able to action something. So like the demographic that I would think would be served first is the demographic that you fit into, and probably a larger number and a growing number, if it is to your point, like given like the population, Gen Z or whatever. What we're saying is that demographic is growing. Younger people, and that are probably part of more of a fitness culture, are the ones that are being diagnosed.
Yep.
So how do we support them? And then hopefully it trickles down. So, yeah, that was my long-winded way of saying no. I think, or realization to who I think we're talking to, and it's you and Avedis, right? Like, is what I would think. I guess my next question is, because I heard you say it, and would that be a good enough start, or do you still think there would need to be like the human touch, or is it as simple as we're doing an online education program where both this information and these templates can be shared.
I think an online program would be perfectly fine. I mean, the fact of the matter is a lot of the patients, at least in my experience, there's not a whole lot of time to do in-person things, because when I tell you there's a lot of appointments, like it's literally like at least a part-time, if not a full-time job, right? You're going to follow-ups, you're going to consults, you're going for blood draws, you're going for infusions. So like to now add, like even when I was seeing Alyssa for PT, to now add that twice a week in the mornings to everything else you're trying to do, like getting there in person is tough. Yeah. So if you had a strong online program with resources, cancer patients don't sleep really well. So like and my experience is like they're always looking for resources. So and they're used to being online. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be some personal component to it, even like a virtual one. And I don't know how many people you'd be able to serve in that way, but some of the people that I follow that I do try to get, nutrition and health information from, it's all video based. It's all YouTube. It's video based. You can schedule chats. You can, or they might have tiers, where, if you want the one-on-one coaching once a month, you're going to pay for more. And I do think you would have, I think people would pay for it, but I think if you're looking to get something off the ground, an online platform would be perfectly fine. I would have found it on night 1, 2, 3. I mean, when we were searching for strength, cancer strength trainers, like something, and just wasn't anything out there.
I think the long play would be to build a practitioner off of the core online community curriculum. I think that would be like the long play, because if you know that there's some, if she couldn't have gone to like an Alyssa or a me, I think that the frustration would have consumed the individual.
Yeah.
Anyone like that. Because like to your point, you see yourself deteriorating from like being strong, agile, like whatever, all the things, right? So you need something to cut out the voice in your head sometimes. So to be able to pivot to someone sometimes is, I think, super useful, which is why I strategically was not involving myself all the time, because it's hard for her, like to just be with me, and then it's emotional. It's like, nah, like go to Alyssa or go to Reese and his team, like just a bit. We'll put a team together, and just as long as just whoever you want to be with that week, like it is what it is. I think that actually, as an individual, I'm not saying that would be the strategy for everyone, but just knowing that, it helps. It helps when you have a community. That's why she has these Peloton groups and Facebook support groups and everything else. Like if she only had me, I don't actually think it would have worked well.
It's not funny. I use the word funny a lot in the wrong places. One of my good friends and also a coach said to me a long time ago, he said, I do not coach my wife on how to lift, on how to lose weight, on how to do anything. I, at no point in time am my wife's coach. I am my wife's husband, which means days where she wants to have chocolate cake, I eat it with her, and I then will pay for a personal trainer to tell her not to eat it.
We're not that
No, but like I got what he was saying, and I feel it's kind of the same. I feel like what you're kind of saying the same thing, right? Like now there are times, of course, I'm still a coach, chime in, but it's important to not feel like, well, because I'm this person, I'm going to be this person, meaning like professionally. Let's build out your team. And then, there are going to be the days where I put on my coach hat, but I'm husband, partner, whatever it is first. So I just kind of, I felt like I kind of connected that with that.
I think, I will say, I think if every person going through what I just went through over the last year had an Avedis like at home there every day, you're going to be the better for it.
Hell yeah.
As the patient, it's just hard to always come if that is in fact your person. Like it's hard to, which I don't think a lot of people are in that circumstance. But if it were like you're now, the patient is always relying on their spouse to be like helping them through their training, helping them through their eating, reminding them like, yeah, you feel like shit, but you still got to eat, right? Like all of those things. To then also put on them like the actual thoughts that are going through your head, right? The anxieties, the worries, the fear about surgeries, the fear about appearance, the fear about being able to do all the things everybody's expecting you to do while you're doing treatment. Like that's now you're just dumping on them, right? Whereas to his point, if you build a team, you know, who cares if you dump on the team? Like that's they walk away from it and they don't have to listen to it over and over and over again on loop. So I don't know. I mean, I would be happy to, if there's certain questions in terms of research that you want me to pose to some of my support groups, I'm happy to do that too. I mean, I'm really only in the Peloton one because frankly, some of them are really depressing. So, but the Peloton one is very exercise driven and kind of idea sharing. So if there's questions that you're like, hey, ask your group what they would think about this, like I could get a beat on that from a good number of people.
I would love for, of course, truncated, but essentially like what I'm asking you, like if the group feels like, I don't want to say low level, but like would you have found this helpful? Like, and they go, well, what is this? If you had found an online course that was giving you like the basics of strength training and like some guidance around how to manage certain key elements of what you're going to experience over the next year, would that starting point? And if not, what would you have wanted? And would that be like a tier that you would have, like you said, if it's a tier, like what would have been valuable to you that you felt like was not a resource yet? And this is what we are thinking about. What do you think? I would love to get feedback on what people think and if they share the same thoughts.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Avedis. There are two people in this, right? Like, you know, like there are two people as part of this. And like you said, not everybody gets to be a professional and have the expertise, but there is always a second person that probably wants to try and find solutions just as much as the person that's going through it. Is there value in a partner position education element to this, where, you know, you have had, you know, the benefit of being an expert, but where you could be like, man, for those that aren't experts, at the very least, if they also knew X, Y, and Z, I would love for people to know either these things or this is how you can support this journey as the partner, man. Like, because your role it's not that it's not forgotten, but you know, you've got a key role as well. And there's support for your person as well that might be of value here, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I would, I always caution people when they're asking my advice and opinion on things because I'm learning in my old age that I have this uncanny ability to remove emotion from situations and then just act in a very flow chart, if this then that, like where the majority, I mean, I just, people can't do that. So the way I then sometimes can come across in something is like, I don't know if it's harsh, but it's just like, why are you crying? it's not you going through it. Like not Jess being the one, but like you as the person, like you can't cry too. Like you now have to, because that's easy for me. Like not that I don't feel, but like I can't now. You know what I mean? I'm like it's being a coach. Like you can't always say what's on your head. You gotta take the high road or a different path. So I would 100% and because I guess because I know that about me, I 100% would be on board to do this. I would just have to figure out ways to now get that message across in that, because I'm not a good coach when it comes to how to control emotion. I just control emotion really well. If that, I don't know if that even makes sense, but
no, it makes complete sense, and it makes complete sense. And you answered, I think, what I was part of the question. Are there tools outside of like emotional control tools, like out that again that we could educate people on? And I'd have to wrap my head around it. But I guess what I'm saying is I don't think the other person should be forgotten.
yeah.
And so I'm wondering if there are ways to address and or help, because I would imagine whatever sensation, whatever yearning for information that would help you get through this process, Jess, that you felt was probably mirrored by Avedis, even though he was not going through it, but because he's your partner, right? It's not like because I'm going through it, I'm the only one that is going to search for solutions online. Betsar, he probably looked up more than you did because he wants to play that role. So when I say like tools, like I also think for the partner, here are tools or here is information that you can probably use in this. You know what I mean? I guess I don't want it to be like this is for the cancer patient.
Right.
I think I want it to be for this is for people that are going through it, which includes the partner. Right?
Yeah, and I believe it to be important. I mean, for a lot of reasons, one big one that we see all the time is that when someone's trying to lose weight and their partner is eating like a cow, like the other person can't lose weight. So it's making it hard. So if for no other reason, just being a helpful partner in either modeling the behavior, helping change the behavior, whatever it is. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, or just being supportive. I mean, there were definitely days where Avedis just came to the gym with me. He'd probably already worked out, but knew that I was like low motivation and was like, no, we'll just go do a little something. Right. And so having just, and I don't know I guess I don't know what tools you give somebody to explain that, but I do believe it's important. Like if I'd come home every day feeling like crap and he was just sitting on the couch drinking a beer and, you know, whatever, it would have been very easy for me to just be like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to plop down here and do nothing because that's what I feel like doing, but I know that I shouldn't, but I don't have anybody pushing me along, right? Like gently encouraging me. Sometimes not so gently. Like sometimes it has to not be gentle. It has to be what he said, like, or I guess you weren't talking about the patient, but you know, you just gotta do it. Like you gotta get through it. It's a finite amount of time. This is the game plan. Now we got to execute. But what's the game plan that we give to a supportive partner? I don't know what that looks like, but there is one.
I think it's expectations. Like if I had known more about cancer, and that's one thing I've told almost everyone is that, whatever you think you know about cancer, because of all the commercials, you don't know a damn thing. Like, you don't know. Like, I don't care who. Like, there's no way you know what this is. Like, because ordinarily, like in the beginning, we were both shocked that it takes so long to even go get it. Like, we know it's in there. Can we go get this thing?
You just get the cancer out.
So everything from start to finish. But so I think for me, the most valuable piece would have been just the knowledge of everything coming. So then when she's being hit with it, we're not getting hit with it at the same time and being shocked together. And then, I mean, that just creates like chaos. So now you got to manage that chaos at the same time. I think just general knowledge of like what general cancer treatment would look like would be just even with her mom. Her mom diagnosed with breast cancer. So me telling you that, Dennis, they both had breast cancer. In your head, as someone not probably, I'm just going to assume like well educated on it, treatment might look the same, but they didn't even have the same surgery, like to get the cancer out. It wasn't like anywhere near the same surgery. And not one was aggressive, one wasn't aggressive, which may opt her out of radiation and chemo altogether. Like I didn't even know that. I thought all cancer people had chemo. Like,
Cancer people. Yeah.
So it's just the education of it for the second person is huge, just fundamentally, because then it's easier to help. Like you feel helpless too sometimes because it's just like, none of this makes sense.
And the oncologists don't do a good job of setting expectations because, first of all, you don't see them for weeks after you get your diagnosis. And then when you do see them, it's very much like, okay, well, this is what we know, but we still have to do all these other things to figure out the exact course of treatment. But even having like a little visual of, this is what this might look like, and being able to step through that instead of laying awake at night being like, I have no idea what's about to happen for the next 12 months. It's, to Vedas' point, like, it's just the unknown, I think, for at least for me, and I know for him was hard because it felt like an eternity when you were trying to get that information. But to your other point, during that hard 8 weeks when you're just like floundering trying to figure out what's going to happen, why not be creating or sticking to routines that are now going to carry you through whatever you're going to go through? So yeah.
Vedas, what you just said is what I think I meant by tools, because those are tools, right? Like, those are psychological survival tools, those are preparation tools, whatever it is. That's kind of exactly what I mean. Like we said, how can we prepare the partner for what's coming? Because if the partner is prepared, he will or she will then have the ability to support their partner better than without having the knowledge of it, right? And that's kind of what I mean, where it's kind of like a part A, part B, then they kind of come together. And here is, a support system for you, and at the very least, from an information standpoint. So, like,